All right, so this time on to the ILI, the NITE types. This is INTp in Socionics, but is usually the INTJ in MBTI world. All right, but we're in Socionics land here. So the ILIs, a very introverted type usually. Yep, it's kind of how you have to start off. Very introverted type, very much in their heads, probably the most in their head, introverted sort of type. Uh, I would say the most by far, even out of the NTs. This is part of the NT Researchers Club, another type that likes to think abstractly about ideas, concepts, be in their head, pondering things, trying to make sense of things. Um, very usually kind of very intellectual seeming things, analyzing stuff in depth. This is the type that probably does that more than any other type, even more than the than any other NT. And that's because they're led with an I, right? An NI, it's an abstract, intuitive element that they're dealing with, and it's very much well, there's more to it as we kind of keep talking. But basically, they're in their heads really thinking about stuff, drilling into whatever interests them, whatever topic is interesting to them. They think about it, spend a lot of time analyzing it. To others, they may seem like a type that just doesn't do much of anything. Like they're not seen physically moving around, physically trying to do stuff, working with their hands. They seem like a type that's very idle. It's just kind of lounging about, sitting around, fiddling around on their computer or something. They don't seem to really be just that active. And that's because they're in their heads thinking about stuff a lot. They really enjoy that. Now, their NI is going to be attached to TE. TE is the creative function. So that NITE, they tend to be looking at whatever in their mind, imaginations, possibilities, um, topics of interest, and they're trying to figure out how it works, analyzing it. What are some of the deeper meanings in there? Where could things be going? What do we know about that topic? Um, they're not a type that is open to all kinds of different ideas and bouncing around stuff the way like an NE dominant type might be. Is a type that has certain things it is interested in, and then it's going to want to drill into those particular topics that it's spending its time thinking about and analyzing and figuring it out. Um, because of this almost excessive use of NI, they're seen again as a very idle type, as almost a lazy type. They might get criticized as that at times because they just never seem to be doing much of anything. Um, in order to have NI, again on top, they basically means your SE is at the bottom. It's going to be the suggestive function. SE is getting things done, moving around, acquiring more things, being energetic and forceful in the physical environment, and so on. So it's very high NI, thinking about stuff and pondering, with very low SE. Um, but let's keep going through this. So the NI, again, attached with TE as the creative, analyzing. They're usually very good with a lot of information. They understand a lot of how things work, facts, data, statistics, what's going on with stuff. They trust that. They trust the data on things. They will research it a lot on whatever topics interest them. They'll research what do we know about it? What does the science say about it? What do the relevant bits of information, authority figures say about it? They'll spend a lot of time doing that. Um, so they can be very, very knowledgeable. Some people even describe them as being very pedantic because they can be nitpicky on the data, the facts, what words, how people describe things, how people say things work. They can be very picky on how those things actually work. Now they have TE as the creative function, which also means they have TI as a demonstrative function. So you're looking at these three major players going on here, NI being the dominant or base function, TE being the creative, and then you're seeing TI as a demonstrative function. So they're very strong on TI too. They're strong on creating systems. They're strong on figuring out what works. This is what works. This is how things are proven to work, and so on. And I can easily create a system, or I can explain the system of how things are organized and come together and maintain a certain system and structure to how these things are meant to work, how these things are meant to kind of like align with each other. But at the end of the day, the TI is not really, it's not valued. So they can alter that structure, that system if needed, in favor of something that's more efficient and more effective. They don't mind it as much, right? They value TE being a little more practical minded, much more than a TI. Um, Now, they're not as outgoing productive as some other types might be, like LIEs or some of the other sensory types who are just a little bit more grounded, more here, present in the world, trying to get day-to-day stuff done. This is a type that at the end of the day, they're NI dominant, really up in their heads thinking about stuff. So they can be very unproductive people. They might spend a certain amount of time in their life, especially when they're younger, um, just not doing much, just seemingly, okay, from the outsider's perspective. In their heads, they're thinking about stuff and they're figuring things out and they're studying subjects they like or whatever. But they're a type that may be very much a homebody, very much hanging around the house, playing video games, looking at stories that they're interested in or whatever. And it seems very like you're not really doing much. And they can kind of like it. Uh, this is one of those types of people that, again, they like spending so much time in their head analyzing stuff that they can come across as very unsocial, right? They're at the party or the gathering, but they're not really talking to many people at all. They're not engaging much, and they may not want to. Uh, that's something that this type talks about a lot. If they're interested in what you're talking about and your topic, they can socialize and engage. If they're not interested in what you're talking about, they won't engage in many cases, unless they have to, unless you force them to. But otherwise, they're not interested. They're not interested. They're not talking. They're very on and off that way. I'm not into what you're talking about. Whatever. I don't. But okay. See, an NE dominant type might be able to bounce around different topics. Oh, what are you guys talking about? Okay, that's different. Yeah, let's explore that a little bit. Oh, that type. Yeah, whatever. Let's explore that. But NI is more. I have these things that I'm into, and I'm sticking with these things that I'm into. And if you're not really doing what I'm doing or into what I'm into, then I don't care what you guys are on about. And it can seem very cold that way. Um, because it's cold, because it's very in their heads, doing their own thing, this is a type that is FE polar. Really shitty FE. This is one of the types that's notorious for just looking really uninterested in dealing with other people, expressing themselves, showing, emoting, and really showing expression on their face, in their attitude, and their vibe. They can seem very low energy, low key kind of personalities at all times. They're really, really bad with the FE stuff. Um, Sometimes they may want to be a little more FE, show a little more energy, try to work the mood a little bit, but it's like they just can't. They're just terrible at it. Um, they can seem very in their heads, so much so that it's like it just seems like you have to really work hard to fish them to get out of their head and be in the present moment, interact with the rest of us and do stuff. They can really struggle with that a lot. um, and then there are times where they don't want to. Again, they're pleasantly content thinking about whatever they're thinking about, analyzing whatever they're analyzing, and they really don't care about what's going on with the group over there. um, at least that's the impression you get when you look at them, so it's very hard to tell when they do care and when they don't care. They're really struggling, again, to demonstrate that feeling of care, not caring, being involved with people. This is another type, like a lot of the gammas, like LIEs too at times, that can seem very negative as well, because they're so into how things actually work the real world data, the real world analysis, that they can just tell it like it is. Hey, this is how it works. What you guys are talking about is bullshit, pie in the sky, fantasy stuff. Nothing works like that. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. They can be that type to bring up that sort of analysis that's cold. It's like a cold shower of water thrown at you. And that kind of ruins the FE vibes. Uh, they're a type that's kind of known to do that at times. Again, unfortunately, many of the gammas can do that. This type's probably the worst at it, or at least usually known to be the worst at it. Okay, so carrying on. Yeah, FE polar. So you get that NI Dom vibe, you get that quiet, very analytical TE, TI combination going on, and you see FE polar, flat affect in some cases. This is a type that some people almost describe them as appearing autistic-like. No offense. But some people even use those terms for this type. And you can kind of see why they might use that term, even if they're using it wrong, but you can kind of see why they're using it. So anyway, carrying on. So they're FE polar, but they're FI mobilizing. They value FI. They do usually know what they're into, what they care about, and they know who they like and who they care about. Maybe not right away when they're younger, but as they kind of develop, they will develop understanding of who they're into, what they're interested in, and sticking to that. They are very capable of maintaining relationships quite well, usually more in like a spouse, significant other type of arena, where once they find that right person that works well with them, they can really stick with them, maintain that relationship. That person matters to them, and be very good at maintaining it, basically, spending time with that person and so forth, being in their presence. The same goes with the number of other people that they like, that they consider them close friends, close people in their life, which is probably not going to be many. It's probably going to be a very small circle of people that they actually really like, really care about, like to spend time with, like to talk to, because you have mutual ideas and interests or whatever. Yeah, they can be very consistent with those people as well. Okay, so it's FI mobilizing. SE is going to be suggestive. I kind of touched on that already, because NI is dominant, SE is suggestive function. This is like the fourth spot if you're coming out of MBTI world. And this is a type that kind of aspires a little bit to have more of that physical energy, to get out in the world and do stuff, make things happen. Let's actually do it in reality, not just sit around thinking about it, but let's actually do something about it. They can aspire to do that, but they really struggle with that. This is a type that is, as I said, very introverted, usually spends a lot of time on their own, in their head, in their house, in the places they're comfortable with, and just don't go out. This is possibly one of those types that doesn't even want to go out. They're quite sometimes very comfortable just hanging out in their house, in their space, on their computer, looking up things that they like to look up, whatever, and just they can do that for days. Every once in a while, you run into some of these people, and they'll be the type to say, "I could be left in my house for 2 weeks and not see a single human being, and I would be perfectly fine. I wouldn't blink an eye at all." I've heard plenty of ILIs that are like that. Extremely introverted in that sense. Okay, not all are going to be that bad. Some of them, can socialize more, but it's a common thing to see that they tend to be very much in their head that way. So they need help sometimes with the SE, and they can appreciate people who can kind of help bring some energy and some physical, let's get it done type of energy to them. So other SE dominant types, particularly the SEE, the ESFP is supposed to be their dual type for that reason. But really anybody who can bring a little bit more of that life to kind of help them kind of get moving physically, get things done, or help them go get things done. That often is good for the ILIs. All right, where else were we? As a role function, SI. So they're not particularly great with SI either. They're just not great with sensory stuff, period. But they're not really great with SI. They don't really value it. They only do it if they kind of need to. And this is more like taking care of themselves. This is more of like taking care of their surroundings a lot, their creature comforts at home, making sure they're eating right, making sure they're maybe exercising. Um, uh, Again, the creature comforts around the house. What are you wearing? What are you doing? Sometimes people can describe them as a type that doesn't understand the physical ailments going on with their bodies. Some people would describe that. But they put very little effort into this unless required to. It almost gives that impression of a type that is so in their head at home, sitting around doing their own thing, possibly alone. So you almost get this vibe of like the bachelor pad whose place looks kind of like a mess and there's just stuff here and there and whatever. They're fine with it. But anybody else who walks in there is gonna be like, Jesus, you need to get some sunlight in here. Like you need to kind of like clear this up a little bit. You've been on your computer a little too long. Um, you get that kind of impression. Um, but again, also one of those areas that can depend a little bit on the individual. What's their work life like? What's their culture like, and so on. And they might put more effort in that SI stuff. Um, okay, yeah, we had that, and then NI. Since they're NI dominant, they would be NE ignoring. As I said, they tend to be focused on certain things that they do care about and like, and they kind of stick to that. They're not crazy about exploring other concepts and ideas and what other people are talking about and doing and what's going on over there. And they tend to have the things that they like, and that's it. They focus on that. So if they're not interested in what you're talking about, they don't care. Like whatever, you go away, go over there and do what you're doing. I'm doing my thing. Okay. Um, Yeah. Now they will, of course, use the NE when they need to. So if they're interested in a topic or maybe it piques their interest, they'll explore something new. They'll go into some other thing. If they want to learn more about the topics they already are interested in, they'll have to do a little NEing to kind of like go look around and see what else is new and happening in their particular field of interest. What else could be done there? um, they'll do a little NE, but just enough to help reinforce and support the NI, support what they actually are interested in and where things are going. Um, yeah. So ultimately, it's a type that is usually again very knowledgeable about usually the areas that they're knowledgeable about. Uh, Very knowledgeable, very nerdy, very into those things. They can be kind of cold sometimes. They can be very good decision makers, especially long-term decision makers. So you put them in kind of more of a managerial position, or an advisor position would be better. But something like that where they're able to kind of like evaluate decisions being made and where is this going to go, and is this going to be an effective decision that's good for the business, good for the company, good for the organization, good for the overall thing. Is this going in the right direction and meeting the intent we want it to? Or are there going to be some obvious flaws in the plan, right? Um, they can be very good in those positions. Again, probably better is more like a consultant, advisor type of role, right? Um, because they managerial, they don't really want to deal with people very much. They usually just don't. It's, like I said, I can't stress it enough because it's just so obvious. They're usually a very introverted type, doing their own thing. If they can avoid talking to people and just do the thing on their own without having to talk to anybody, they will. Okay, most of the time they will. Um, this is a type you think about also when, like to me, I would say someone like a Nikola Tesla or somebody like that would probably make a really good candidate for ILIs. Um, Other scientists, other individuals, um, scientists in various fields, doesn't have to be pure science, could be scientists who study human behavior, study um, biological systems, study computer systems, study archetypical systems. Maybe they want to go more of a philosophical route, and they do that, and they want to kind of really dive into certain philosophies and archetypes and things of that nature. They can spend a lot of time studying that, researching that, getting good at those things too. But they usually have their interests, whatever one of those fields or things they go into that, they study the hell out of it, they get really good and knowledgeable about that, and that's very much what they're about. These are the topics that they analyze in depth and try to really understand. They're not a type that demonstrates a whole lot of interest in bouncing around to different ideas, different other entirely different schools of thought or entirely different subjects. Okay, that's more NE. Lots of different subjects that seem completely unrelated. So pretty focused type. Let me see what else. Again, a type that could really use help from SEEs, ESFPs, or other SE types. Can benefit from other types that are just more outgoing and extroverted, to sort of help them out, help them kind of get out of their little shell, get out of the little bubble, come out of your house, your cave every once in a while, and stop thinking about things and put those ideas into action. Make your idea into something. Do it. Put a book about it. Really study it. Go to school for it. Build the device you're thinking of or whatever. They could really use somebody to kind of help motivate them to take action. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, Gamma Quadra. This is a type also sometimes gets described as being very like rare type, especially out of MBTI world. I disagree. I don't think they're rare. They're not exactly a dime a dozen, but they're not rare either. The problem with this type is that they're not very social usually. They're not very outgoing. They're not very talkative. So even if they're working next to you, you might not realize that you're dealing with an ILI. You might mistake them for a different type. You might think they're just something else. There's some other type, whatever, right? You didn't get to know them well enough to really understand that's an ILI you're talking to. Or it's also a type that they just don't poke their head out of the sand, right? They're so doing their little reclusive, introverting things that you just don't see them very often, right? Very different from like ESTP SLEs and EIIs, or what is it? No, EIEs, and other extroverting types that are out there in the world. They're out there in the media. These are people who are on TV all the time. They're celebrities. They're politicians. They're in the limelight. They're in the spotlight. We see them over and over again. This is a type that, again, likes to be very reclusive and do their own things. So you just don't see them that much. And even when you do, you're not sure what you're looking at. You're mistaking them for something else. And then you end up thinking that the ILIs are extremely rare breed. It's like, no, they're not. They're not that rare, I should say. Kind of like all the NTs can have sort of the same general problem. All the NTs can be a little difficult to find. Yeah, there's probably not that many of them. But even when you see them, you may not realize what you're looking at. You may mistake them for some other type. And so you think that you never find these people. All right. So anyway, so that pretty much sums it up. Yeah. So again, like and subscribe. Let me know what you think. I'm sure there's many ILIs out there looking into this kind of stuff. They're another type that's pretty common to run into in these sort of typology forums and communities and so on. But again, they're not typically social, so they're not a type to really engage much unless they see some point to it. But anyhow, if you are, let me know. What do you think? If you're not, what do you think of this type? If you're something else, what do you, is this your kind of people? Maybe you're an SCE and you're like, I love these guys. I love these people. They keep me sane and grounded and tell me how to do things right. So Until the next one, guys.